come back here. And then when we get to the, after we do the introductions, we're going to just mix it up, and I've got questions for everybody. How are you? I've been wonderful. You good? You got everything you need? And we're going to be passing mics around, but I think we've got one every other person or so.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
I was afraid I'm going to fall off the stage.
I have the same feeling. I've never been on this stage.
Because it's very seamless right there.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
I've been on this stage a lot, but
Yeah, you could take
usually not this close.
you take a tumble.
Yeah.
You're out of luck.
Whatever.
I haven't seen you.
I have not seen this either. I talked to, I just saw Richard.
Oh, okay.
So, you got somebody moving into your... Yeah. We've got some technical meeting. I can be there. So we got Jim can be there for a few minutes and then come up over there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's a really cool spot.
Okay.
How are y'all going to be big? Good. Yeah.
Test, test. Test.
I turned it off.
Test. That work? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out this morning. I'm Peter Kovacs. I'm the editor of The Advocate. And as you may know, this event was originally scheduled for yesterday, January 14th. And I guess about a month ago, I talked to Judy Terzotis, and I told her, I don't think we thought this through very well, but January 14th would be the morning after LSU plays for the national championship in New Orleans. And at the time, of course, we didn't know for sure that they would be playing for the national championship, but you know, it's hard to move an event, and we appreciate everything that you all did to come and that our sponsors did, because it's complicated. Anyhow, you know, we thought about it a little bit, and we have a great panel here, and we thought people would really like to come to our panel, but it's also kind of tough to compete with Joe Burrow. And so even with great panelists like Joe Savoy, but finally, you know, we decided, and we had, by the way, our tickets were cheaper. That was another advantage we had. But finally, we decided that it just really wouldn't be fair, and we just couldn't see Joe Burrow playing in that big old empty Superdome with just Clemson fans while everyone else came here. So we decided to move our event. And we appreciate everything you all did to help us with that and to come here today. We have a great panel, and I'm going to turn it over to Kristen and Adam, and they're going to run the show today.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Kristen Askelson. I'm the managing editor at the Acadiana Advocate. So I know Monday night was really fun, but I just hope everybody has recovered. We've got a lot of smart people in the room, and we're ready to look forward to 2020. So what's going to happen in a few minutes, we are going to have our panelists, who I hope you all got one of the sheets at the front that tells you a little bit about each panelist, because that may help you as we go through. They're going to give a brief introduction and talk to you a little bit about what they're looking for in 2020. After that, business editor Adam Daigle and I are going to do a panel discussion. We've prepared some questions for each panelist. We have also solicited questions from our online audience, to whom we're streaming right now. And if we have time at the end, I'm hoping we can carve out a few minutes to take questions from the audience, if you have any. But first, none of this would be possible without our sponsors. You see them up here: Entergy, Home Bank, Lafayette General Health, and Acadian. And before we get started, we had a couple of sponsors who were going to speak. One of them is stuck on the bridge, sadly. So we really appreciate Entergy being here and allowing us to have this fine event. We do have a speaker on our panel, but they're not able to get here. So I would ask Natalie Lemoyne from Home Bank to just tell us a little bit about why they're here.
Thank you, Kristen, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Home Bank, we're very excited to be a part of this morning's economic discussion. This is actually Home Bank's second year in sponsoring this event, in large part because there aren't many opportunities where you're able to hear from so many thought leaders and community leaders within our community today. Over the years, Home Bank has certainly grown. In fact, we were started in 1908 right here in Lafayette, and over the past almost 112 years, we've remained committed to our community and to our roots. We have 450 employees that pull into our parking lots every single day, ready and excited to serve our customers. Throughout the 112 years of our existence, we remain focused on how to keep moving our businesses forward. Our leadership team has invested heavily in technology and innovation, and it's our goal to make sure that our business partners can focus on what they do best, and that's running and growing their businesses. Our bankers are always there to lend a hand and to meet one-on-one and to give counsel. We've worked hard to become trusted community partners within this market as well as the others. In the future, we hope to continue to serve you as well as many others. If you'd like to strategize about how we can help your business grow, please feel free to seek us out at any time. Again, we're excited to be here today, and we look forward to hearing from each of our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks again to all of our sponsors. So I was going to go in alphabetical order and start with Ben, who is probably used to going first, but sorry, Ben. I'm going to throw a wrench into our lineup a little bit, and I'm going to ask Dr. Gary Wagner from UL to start, and then we'll come back and go down the road, because I think Gary can, as an economist, can give us sort of an overview of the national, regional, and local economy, and that can serve as a backdrop for what everybody else has to say.
Can you hear? Okay, there we go. So good morning. I just want to thank the event sponsors and the advocate for inviting me to participate this morning, and I want to thank all of you for taking time to attend. What I want to do is just give you a quick sense of economic conditions nationally and locally, because this shapes my outlook for the coming year, and I think it can give you some context for the comments from the rest of the distinguished panelists. So within the 5-parish Lafayette Metropolitan Statistical Area, or metro area, where a lot of economic data are calculated, I think the region finally started to gain some momentum from the sharp declines in oil and gas in 2019. 2 of the strongest months of employment growth that we've seen in the region since 2013 occurred within the last 12 months. And home prices, which had started to dip negative in late 2018, have actually rebounded with 2 very strong quarters where year-over-year home price growth in the region is exceeding 4%. Nationally, to give you some context, year-over-year home price growth is around 6%, so we're actually performing pretty well on that metric. I think growth projections for the U.S. have been trending down for some time. Since the recession, the Great Recession ended in 2009, GDP growth, so GDP is gross domestic product. It's the market value of all the goods and services that get produced. It's the way that we measure an economy. GDP for the U.S. has been growing at about a 2% pace. Projections over the next 4 quarters are that GDP will slow to around 1.7%. For this reason, my own forecast for employment growth in Acadiana is that we're going to see growth in the range of 1 to 1.2% for 2020. I know initially that might not sound like a very large number. That's a little bit faster than what we've seen over the last couple of years, and it's actually very consistent with the long-run average rate of employment growth in the region. So we're getting closer to our average. That rate of growth would position us to grow slightly slower than the nation, but slightly faster than the state. Over the last couple of years, there have really been 3 metro areas kind of driving growth in Louisiana. It's been Acadiana, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. And in fact, over much of the last 18 months or so, Acadiana's been right there as either the top or the second fastest growing metro area in the state. So Acadiana's really been a key driver. I think for our particular region, what I'm looking for in 2020 is for healthcare to be driving most of that growth. We've seen a lot of growth in healthcare over the last 5 years in particular. And so my forecast could be revised upward if we see significant growth in the healthcare sector, or alternatively, if we see any type of significant rebound in oil and gas. Oil and gas employment in the region is at about 14,000 jobs, so it's about 40% below where it was in 2013. So the industry took a very, very significant hit, and employment growth in the industry has been relatively flat since that time, and healthcare has really picked up some of that slack. The only real downside to the forecast that I have would be, I think we would see slower growth in the region if we have a national recession coming in 2020. You hear talking about this quite a bit in the media, primarily because the U.S. economy has been growing for 126 consecutive months, which is the longest continuous period of growth in U.S. history. So it's natural to start thinking about when the next recession is coming. Just to give you some context for that, members of the Survey of Professional Forecasters, which is administered by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, put a 1 in 5 chance of a recession occurring in 2020. I think that's probably a little bit high, but that I think is the largest downside risk to my outlook for the region in the coming year.
Thanks, Gary. So next up is Ben Berthelot, who is President and CEO of the Lafayette Convention and Visitors Commission.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Gary. I'm not sure what else needs to be said, but nonetheless, it's great to be here today, and it's great to live in a community that understands the importance of tourism as an economic driver. That doesn't happen everywhere, and so we're very proud to be here. In terms of hotel motel receipts, 2019 finished at $79 million, $5 million higher than 2018, $74 million, and $2 million higher than 17, $77 million. Not quite where we were in 2014, but encouraged by that growth. Occupancy up 8 out of the last 11 months, which is very encouraging considering we have 4 new properties in the market and 350 new rooms in the market. And those properties are located in a high density area of Pinhook, College Saloon Road, and Ambassador Caffrey. So what you don't want to see is the traffic just moving around amongst properties, but we've actually seen growth, so encouraged by that. Average daily rate also up. All key metrics in terms of what hoteliers measure are up. The sports market continues to be our fastest growing market, thanks in part to the decision of the leadership and citizens of both Youngsville and Broussard to tax themselves and invest in their infrastructure in 2014. We estimate $10 million in economic impact from sporting events alone, 25,000 room nights, and I expect that's going to continue to happen. There was just a recent announcement, a big softball tournament at Youngsville over the Mardi Gras holidays. Perhaps no better representation of that than the month of July, where we saw a 25% increase in hotel motel receipts, largely due to 5 different either baseball or softball World Series hosted by Broussard and Youngsville. So a direct impact of what the power of tourism can be to a community. Was proud that we were able to, on a very short timeline, fill the gap left when LATCO left to go to New Orleans and book Sugarbird Boxing. That event, although it didn't generate the same amount of room nights, certainly helped to fill the gap that was left when LATCO left. We've brought them back for 2020. Also in 2020, very excited. Although we won't see the direct impact for several more years, we've landed the world's largest travel bloggers conference. It's held twice a year, once internationally, once domestically. It'll be in Lafayette in October. We'll have 600 bloggers here. That return on investment will be nearly $40 million in earned media for our area, which we won't see in terms of direct overnight stays for several years out, but it'll be a great event for our area. Our 2 to 3 year pace in terms of room nights is ahead of where we've been in the past. We have 16 events on the books at the Cajun Dome, but probably the most positive thing I can say as it relates to the overall economy and what others will talk about and the hotel industry is that the midweek transient business is experiencing significant growth. So generally that's corporate travel, and I had one hotelier say it's the highest it's ever been for his property, which is a very important property for us. So to close, just encouraged by where we are and where we're headed, looking forward to 2020 for sure, and looking forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Next up is John Bordelon, President and CEO of Home Bank.
Thank you. Home Bank is the 3rd largest Louisiana bank. It is also the oldest corporation founded in Lafayette. The reason I tell you that is because that landscape has changed drastically. In the last 10, 20, 40 years, that wasn't the case. But as we've all noticed, we've had different downturns, mostly in oil and gas, throughout this community, which has changed the landscape, not just of banking, but of many different companies throughout our region. So with that, you would think that this economy would be failing. To Gary's point earlier, indeed it's not. It's growing at a very nice pace. In fact, one of the leading cities or regions, I should say, in the state. And I blame that on the resilience of our people. Our people keep getting knocked down. Our people keep getting up. And so every time we think, wow, Lafayette's going down, we continue to build that up. Well, nothing could be better for the banking community than to have citizenship that basically continues to fight and continues to drive to make their city and their region strong. With that, many of the banks in the state and across the country that have that type of customer base are very strong, have great, strong credit culture, and are moving forward very well. No better evidence than the sales tax revenues for Lafayette and the region continue to go up, even though we lost 20,000 jobs 4 years ago and have yet to recover all of those jobs. So very strong customer base here in Lafayette. I'm not sure every city across the country can say that. Some of the other challenges facing, excuse me, some of the other challenges facing the banking industry are the regulatory side. After 2007 and the Great Recession, Congress said, we're not going to do that again. So, of course, they tightened down the banking rules and regulations, and they were flowing out of a 10-inch pipe just coming down to banks and creating a lot of headwinds for banks to be able to service their customers. Fortunately, with the administration change, we have seen a change in direction, a lot slower growth in the new regulations coming out, and better than that, some refinement of some old, very, very old and outdated regulations that have been on the books for a while. So we're very excited about the opportunity to be able to serve our customers a lot better with less regulation. Second challenge that we face today as banks is the changing environment of interest rates. So the Fed basically thought, starting about 3 years ago, that interest rates needed to go up because of inflation. Last year they changed direction when that was not necessarily the case, thinking recession was in front of us, and so most banks' balance sheets have had to react to that, and it's been a mixed bag of results for many banks. I think the overall projection for 2020 is that net interest income for most banks will go down because of the rapid change in interest rates in 2019. One other important issue for banks that we've seen over the last several years is a kind of a paradigm shift where you go back 20 years ago and every bank wanted to continue branching into new areas and opening up branches in prosperous areas to gain a larger share of that customer base. What we're seeing today, especially from the larger banks, is a removal of branches and investment in technology. So all of us are having to invest heavily in technology for our customer base, at the same time maintaining very expensive branches that many customers never frequent. I tell this story often. My daughter's been in Florida for 5.5 years, and she still banks with Home Bank. It's just evidence that you don't need a branch necessarily for all customers. So it's not like all branches will go away, but I do think you'll see a continual reduction over the next decade of many branches across the United States. Brings me to my last topic, which is mergers and acquisitions. Basically, 8 years ago, there were 7,200 banks in the United States. Today, there are 5,200. So we've lost 2,000 banks to merger and acquisition activity. That's not counting the banks that went away in 7, 8, and 9 that failed, FDIC failure banks. So I think you'll continue to see, even though 19 was not as strong, I think you'll continue to see an increase in merger activity. And the reason for that is the infrastructure that's necessary to be able to purchase the technology, the secure technology that will allow your customer base to access their accounts is very important to the growth of all banks. So I think as we move forward, that investment will continue to grow. Banks will continue to merge so that they can parlay that investment into better service for the customer. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Our next panelist is Dr. Natalie Harder, Chancellor of South Louisiana Community College.
Great, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Well, I think we're very fortunate, those of us in higher education, to continue to have strong support by our community in our efforts to increase education in our region. As a matter of fact, South Louisiana Community College in the next few weeks will announce with a partner the largest private investment in a two-year institution that our state has ever seen. And the majority of that investment is going to follow along what you see nationally, and that is a demand for short-term credentials. We are very much in the higher ed space, focused on degrees and diplomas, but what we are finding over the last few years is that the demand for short-term non-credit credentials, both by individuals and by companies, continues to grow. We're fortunate that we continue to buck the national trend of decline in enrollments. Indeed, we're up over 6% this fall on the credit side, but we're up more than 300% on the non-credit side over the last 3.5 years. And again, just a reflection of the demands in the marketplace that I think that we are fortunate to be part of, a higher education team in Acadiana that is responsive to that. I think that you'll continue to see higher education be excellent throughout this region, but as many of you may have seen, we're also very focused now on something called 55 by 25. As Dr. Wagner talked about the growth in jobs here over the next year, we want to ensure that we have growth in high wage, high demand jobs. We're not interested in growth in minimum wage jobs. Those are the jobs that tend to be less recession proof. And the fact is that we are pretty maxed out in terms of how we are capitalizing on those who have intended to go to college or are going back to college. But it's the individuals who didn't complete high school, who just completed high school, started college and didn't complete, that we all as a community have to dig deeper and ensure that they are successful from a higher education perspective. So when those high wage, high demand jobs open, we can fill them. So thank you.
All right, our next panelist is Corey Jack. Corey is a business owner and manager of Lafayette Chamber Affairs for One Acadiana.
Well, good morning. I want to thank the advocate for putting on this event. I want to thank all you guys for being here in attendance. I will do my best to try to pack this into 2 minutes. But so a big part of the focus of what I do is I work with small and micro businesses. I help them to access and navigate small business resources that are available to them. And I also help to try to help them overcome barriers that they face that might prevent them from obtaining success or impede their progress on growing their business. Many times I often use the word micro business instead of small business because depending on the conversation, I find that small business can be a bit of a misnomer according to SBA standards. Depending on industry type, a small business can have up to 500 employees. And just to sort of paint an accurate depiction of the type of businesses that I work with, many of them have 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 15 employees. So, I mean, these type of businesses range from a married couple starting a local independently ran coffee shop with a couple of employees to a gentleman with a trucking company that has 8 drivers and 3 office staff, a florist who is transitioning from operating out of her outdoor kitchen to a storefront. So businesses like that. But sticking with SBA's definition of small business, just a couple of numbers on a national scale that I kind of find fascinating and appropriate for the conversation is that over 90, of all United States firms, over 90% of them are small businesses. Over 70% of those are sole proprietors or businesses that are owned by one owner. And a little over 50% of them are home-based businesses. And I find that those numbers are reflected here locally in Acadiana. Some of these businesses, they operate their lifestyle businesses that won't scale beyond the ownership of the initial set of owners, which is fine because what I find is that for many, it creates supplemental income or for many as well, primary income that slowly helps to increase the intergenerational mobility of the people in the community, and that's okay. But some of these businesses and these business owners, they have great ideas that if they're connected with the proper resources, can scale and become even more successful and employ several people. I know last year, Ms. Flo did a great job of talking about unicorns and companies that scale very, very quickly, and I see a lot of those with potential in the community. One thing about Lafayette is we have a great small business ecosystem that a lot of communities can't say the same. I mean, we have local chambers, we have a local and regional EDO, we have the Small Business Development Center that Ms. Heidi Malonzo does a great job at managing, we have the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We have the opportunities made available by SLCC. We have an incubator and an opportunity machine. There's just a lot of resources here that a lot of communities don't have. So we have the infrastructure in place. So now it's just connecting it to the entrepreneurs that need it most. So thank you.
Thanks, Corey. So Ed Jimenez is Vice President for Business and Economic Development for Energy. And unfortunately, I believe he's still on the bridge. Hopefully he will make it and we will carve out some time for him. But right now, I'd like to introduce Flo Meadows, who is a commercial realtor for Ladder & Bloom.
I'm very appreciative of the advocate's role as community convener, connector, and collaborator, such a critical role in helping the uplift of our community, so thank y'all for what you do there. As we prepare for the decade of 2020s, we often look across the global landscape to see what is happening there that might impact the commercial real estate locally. And so this morning we'll take a look at something Fortune covered when they interviewed 20 executive thought leaders across the world, World Economic Forum, MIT, JP Morgan Chase, many others. And it's mostly stories, Corey, you mentioned unicorn. And actually now what we're taking a look at are the decacorns and what's going on with them. The billion-dollar companies that are disrupting what is happening in how we live, how we work, how we play, how we use our commercial real estate. So as I looked at those thoughts, I sort of organized them under workforce, finance, and other significant changes in workforce, as Dr. Harder indicated. Primarily a much more skilled workforce that is needed in order to meet the demands of what's going on in technology with the decacorn companies. So a redesign, if you will, of curriculum between educators and employers, taking a look at much more in the way of on-the-job training. And for the first time, it's a bit of an altered workforce. There are more women than men in the workforce. That's bringing new leadership, new thoughts, new perspectives, new products, new policies. Third, there's a move towards looking at a 4-day work week. It's been proven that there's more productivity, improved performance, and better outcomes. The fourth is what happens when you have better human interaction, and that's driving more use of co-working space, so look for more of that happening. And connecting rural America, or losing it. You know, less than 2% of our population provides us with affordable, accessible food, and our rural farmers, which is very important here for Louisiana, are not connected enough to do what it is they need to do to run the farm. So look for some things there. In the area of finance, they're talking about a stable coin, a gold standard of digital currencies, and the fact that venture capital is transcending Silicon Valley. Since you can live and work anywhere, so can the VC community, so that's good news for our market. For others, or business and government working together, think about how that propel the space race, computer age, internet age, look for what that's going to make happen. Capitalism is taking better care of the planet. You see a lot of corporations adopting much more in the way of corporate social responsibility and understanding what they need to do to improve the planet and using technology for that. Tribal cuisine, more individualized, less mass market. Think of adding cell-produced meat. In the area of health, we have several, maybe like a half dozen multi-billion-dollar corporations entering and significantly changing how we deliver and access health care. They're looking at genomics, most importantly, and what that means for gene editing, for preventive health, treating cancer, and opportunities with agriculture. So the commercial real estate outlook nationally is it's an attractive, reliable option for domestic and foreign investors, $500 billion expected to be invested, and this is the third year for that strong of a market. And the good news for us is they're now looking at secondary and tertiary markets to invest those dollars, and we absolutely need to avail ourselves of that shift. The local commercial real estate market in 19, pretty much a 400 transaction, $100 million market from what we gather in the way of data. And a lot of that, I would say the most notable is industrial, what we've seen in the way of increased sales there. There was an alignment of buyer and seller pricing that was driving more in the way of industrial sales. 5 of those transactions were about 40% of the market. So we saw Slimco's 11 million, Vimed, Garden Heights multifamily transfer, Dr. Ali's medical, almost 4 million, and an industrial building. But there were 4 off-market transactions that I find real notable that I wanted to talk to you about also, because those transactions point to what's happening at the federal level in the way of tax law changes and initiatives that are driving investments in our community. So between Opportunity Zone, qualified business income deductions, we saw about 45 million of investment in our community in multifamily projects, in storage projects, and in medical projects. So that's something you'll want to keep an eye on. What will that mean for our community in 2020? The construction permits, it was a $250 million year. That's $100 million ahead of last year. 3 large projects, LHC's $45 million, the airport expansion, and LCG's communication. So 2020, a year of strength and opportunities for our market as we look at our 5 pillars of community awesomeness. And there's a horizon of promising developments. So you'll see Monkus Park at the Hearst Forum, Airport expansion, UL has several things that I'm sure we'll hear about. One Acadiana is 55 by 25. Downtown will have residential projects, mixed use, parking garage expansion, OM bringing many more startups happening there, oil center, new construction, and repurposing of buildings. Scott and Broussard, over 300 acres of development and new road construction. And Parish Proud, a well-funded beautification effort that will have us looking as beautiful and vibrant as the market that we are. So it's a transformational year, but it's going to require bold, brave, brilliant strategies, and this room is filled with the people that will bring those to the table. So let's bring it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Flo. Our next panelist is Arthur Price. He is president of Badger Oil Company.
Hi, good morning. Okay, so oil and gas, the energy industry in the state of Louisiana is incredibly diverse. We have drilling and production, product transportation by pipeline, rail, barge, truck, refining and petrochemicals, import and now export terminals, and most recently LNG. So very diverse, which is a good thing. Now, when you zoom in on Acadiana, however, that diversity tends to evaporate, and we are concentrated in what we call the upstream sector, which is drilling and production. And within that sector, oil and gas service and supply companies actually lead in employment in Acadiana. So that's really where our activity is concentrated. Now, the best proxy for upstream oil and gas activity is a metric called the rig count, which is quite simply the number of working rigs in Louisiana on any given day. So if you take a deeper dive into the rig count data, you'll see in the last 3 years, the rig count in Louisiana has been flat, holding at about 60 rigs. Now, to put that number in perspective, 10 years ago, we were working an average of 192 rigs, so over 300% higher just 10 years ago. Virtually all of that rig activity in Louisiana is concentrated in two areas, in North Louisiana in the Haynesville Shale, and then way down south in the Gulf of Mexico in deep water. And everything in between has been extremely dormant. So if we look at the national data, we find that Louisiana is just a bit out of phase when it comes to upstream oil and gas drilling and production. Since the Great Recession of 2015 in our industry, the rig count in the United States has doubled. In Texas, their rebound was 20% higher than the national average. However, in Louisiana, we saw a rebound of about 33%, about a third from the lows, and we have remained consistent at that level. So that begs the question, what makes South Louisiana different, and why are we so dormant in that particular area? And I would proffer that the legal climate is one of those reasons. The dawn of the new year marked a new high in legacy lawsuits filed against oil and gas companies in the state. There's now over 500. And keeping in mind that each one of those lawsuits has multiple defendants, many have 10 or more, you're talking about thousands of lawsuits against companies in Louisiana in oil and gas. Since 2013, 7 parishes have also signed on, and they're suing over 140 exploration companies that have drilled wells in their parishes in the last 60 years. So that's certainly having a depressed effect on the activity in the state. So due to that weakened demand for service and supply in Acadiana, we've seen a lot of our companies mobilize people and equipment out of state, working predominantly in Texas due to increased demand there and proximity. However, if we look forward, we see that the Permian Basin, which has really been booming for Texas, is beginning to mature, and the rig count there is starting to moderate, so that'll cause some strain on the service companies from here that are working in Texas. I would expect oil prices, which have been relatively stable in the last few years, to remain in the $50 to $60 per barrel range. Deepwater activity looks to be quite stable for the coming year. So with the flagging demand in the Permian Basin and the lack of tort reform in Louisiana, I don't expect that metrics here will improve that much. So while it's not a bold prediction, I'm predicting a bit more of the same for 2020 relative to 2019. And we're working hard in Baton Rouge and trying to get some meaningful tort reform done in the state. And if we do, I think the future will be bright for Acadiana. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Joseph Savoie, president of the University of Louisiana at Lafayette.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for the invitation to join you here today. I'm particularly pleased that we were able to squeeze a few bucks out of the svelte and debonair Peter Kovacs in the Advocate. That's a good thing for our economic growth. I want to talk a little bit about what the university has in store, the challenges and opportunities for this year and for the new decade. This year, the university will undergo reaccreditation. We'll release a new strategic plan. Both of these processes involve a bit of institutional self-reflection. But because our health as a university is in direct proportion to the region's economic and educational well-being, we're not only looking inward, but we're also looking outward in order to identify what community needs that we have the capacity to address. Now, to be competitive as a region, we simply need more working-age adults with meaningful credentials. This economy rewards people with academic credentials, and it punishes those without them. The university also needs to drive business development and entrepreneurship. Now, in fiscal year 2018, the university expended nearly $125 million on research and development. That figure is double the amount from a decade ago. Much of that figure is derived through external partnerships with federal agencies and private industry that have enabled us to continue to be South Louisiana's primary hub for ideas and innovation. We'll continue to seek similar collaborations because they enable us to refine our research infrastructure, to increase our patent portfolio and protect intellectual property, and to hire and retain the faculty and staff researchers whose innovative work attracts support from businesses and industry. Furthermore, we're going to deepen our workforce development role by strategically aligning course offerings and degree programs to meet the demands of the ever-changing economic landscape. And we'll work to encourage degree completion. It's estimated that about 650,000 Louisiana residents have some college credit but no college degree. More than 73,000 residents fall into this category in Acadiana. 32,000 live in Lafayette Parish alone. We're working with One Acadiana, South Louisiana Community College, and Dr. Harder to bring these adults back to college to get them credentialed so that they can have broader opportunities. So by easing these pathways to the university towards commencement and by creating graduates and not statistics, we're investing in our community's collective health. College graduates typically earn higher salaries. That translates into more robust economic and social landscapes wherever they choose to live. And higher education is intergenerational. If a parent has a degree, a child will be more likely to pursue one as well. The number one predictor of a high school student earning a college degree is if their parent has a degree. Now, we're very, very mindful that we're a public university, and as such, the work that we do must be for the public good. And that's a resolution that we intend to keep this year and every year. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Savoy. Gary, we're going to skip over you for the moment since you went first. And our next panelist to speak will be Troy Wayman, who is President and CEO of One Acadiana.
Thank you, and thanks to the advocate for this event. And Ed, I'm glad to see you made it off the bridge. I'm glad to have you here, and thank you for the sponsorships of this event, to the sponsors of this event. You know, One Acadiana, for a long time on our website, it said formerly the Lafayette Chamber of Commerce. I will tell you that that is not necessarily true. We are still the Lafayette Chamber of Commerce, but we also serve as a non-parish economic development organization. So what I want to talk about are some of the efforts, and you've heard some of it as it relates to our efforts in regards to 55 by 25, increasing the percentage of working age adults across Acadiana who have a high-value credential or a 2 or 4 year degree to 55% by 2025. To give you an idea of how far we have to go on that, currently we're at about 38% across the region. So if current trends would show that by 2025, if we didn't do anything, we would be at about 42%. So we've got about a 13% delta to make up there. And that's right in line with the state's goal, although we set ours first, I will say, of achieving 60% by 2030. The other thing I want to talk to you about is some opportunities that I think that we don't want to pass up on. And we've worked with the other regional organization in our region with APC, the Acadiana Planning Commission, on the federal program, the Opportunity Zone program. And we put together, working with Monique and her team, we put together a great prospectus on the opportunity zones across Acadiana, outlining what the opportunities were for folks who have opportunity zone funds, and it's interesting talking about opportunity zones because you say opportunity like 900 times in any conversation about it. But the opportunities that are available for investment across our region, and out of that, we also worked with LCG on developing one for Lafayette. That is a deeper dive into the opportunity zones within Lafayette. But that is only one of the tools that is available for growth across our region. And to that end, we developed a document called How We Compete, which outlined a number of different economic development incentives that were available to companies that are looking to invest either in downtowns or other areas. Our project activity is very strong right now as far as new industry and existing industry expansions. That is one of the key pieces, and that's where a significant, and I would say the lion's share of our job growth has occurred across Acadiana is through expansions of existing industry. And statistically, that's true across the nation, but here in Acadiana, I think it's even stronger. And one of the things I do want to point out, as Mr. Price said, the legacy lawsuits, not only have they impacted and are continuing to significantly impact the oil and gas sector, but those legacy lawsuits resonate across all industry sectors. When companies are looking at Louisiana as a place to locate, that weighs into their decision. So in many ways, I think we as a region and we as a state have been successful sometimes in spite of ourselves. So we're going to continue to work to diversify our economy. We're going to continue to support the oil and gas sector because we see significant promise in a number of areas across the region. Our job growth has been high, as Dr. Wagner pointed out, which is kind of counter to what you've seen with the job losses that we had in the oil and gas sector. But we think that that's, again, evidence, as someone mentioned, the resiliency of the community across Acadiana. Also, Corey, as our director of Lafayette Chamber Affairs, will hopefully have some more discussion about what he's going to be doing as it relates to small and minority businesses, or as he puts it, micro businesses, which does make sense when you consider federal definition is 500 employees or less, because majority of the companies we're going to be working with are going to be significantly smaller than that.
Thanks, Troy. Up next is Richard Zuschlag, Chairman and CEO of Acadian Companies.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I thank the advocate for giving us the opportunity to share our insight. If I could ask our timekeeper up there to give me a couple of extra minutes since I'm a sponsor, I would appreciate that. When she starts waving those flags, I get nervous. Acadian Companies had moderate growth in 2019, and we're very optimistic about 2020. Our company now employs 5,000 employees with an annual payroll of about $265 million. 1,200 of those employees live in the 9-parish area that One Acadiana represents. That makes up 33% of our payroll at about $86 million annually. Our biggest challenge is recruiting and retaining EMTs and paramedics. This is not just a problem for Acadian, but it's a problem nationwide. We currently have about 40 openings in the 9-parish area for EMTs and paramedics. A typical EMT averages a salary of about $40,000 a year, and a paramedic averages a salary of about $62,000 a year. For our immediate hiring needs, we are actively recruiting existing paramedics nationwide. We're also marketing our National EMS Academy in conjunction with SLCC to recruit EMTs and paramedics. Dr. Natalie Harder has been a big champion and has helped us expand this program statewide. And I appreciate the way she and Tidro Savoy work together with the university so that students that graduate from SLCC can take those credit hours and transfer them over to UL. And many of them will go on for a nursing degree or some other type of 4-year degree. That really works well for people who want to continue to climb up the ladder. To build our pipeline for the future, we're working diligently to introduce a career in emergency medicine to our area high schools by partnering with high schools to develop first responder curriculums. We have also greatly expanded our Boy Scout Explorer post in this region. We are also piloting an apprentice program to be able to help reduce some of our training costs. Some other initiatives for 2020 include the continuation of our participation in the Healthcare Innovation Fund 2, along with Arseners, Lafayette General, Schumacher, Clinical Partners, and LHD Group to provide seed capital and support for innovators and startups in the healthcare industry. We've also participated with UL in the Innovative South project, which has already yielded success in attracting new businesses and talents here in Acadiana. Working with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, we're going to have a pilot program that will start this fall to treat patients in the most appropriate environment through triage, including treatment in place and transport to alternate care facilities such as urgent care clinics and walk-in clinics. This will result in a tremendous cost and utilization savings to both the patients and the providers. It's my personal belief, looking at the data from the Lafayette Parish 911 Center, that approximately a third of the emergency 911 calls for ambulance can be diverted from hospital emergency rooms to these walk-in clinics. We expect this to be a win-win for everyone involved in the care of patients, and it allows the hospitals to better utilize their facilities and personnel. To help prevent people from becoming seriously ill, we are continuing our pilot program with paramedicine. It's fairly a new concept, which we send paramedics into the homes of chronically ill patients for preventive care. They not only take care of the medical issues, but they also ensure that the patient is eating well and taking their medications as prescribed. Early results are consistent with that from other programs across the country, which are showing promising results and a better quality of life for these patients. Acadian Total Security, our retail security division, is outpacing the industry's growth. One of the newest market segments that is really on fire is cannabis growers. Acadian has a contract with one of the nation's largest publicly traded cannabis producers, providing security systems, access control, video surveillance, and managed cloud services at 14 facilities across the United States, including cultivation, manufacturing, and retail outlets, all designed and monitored right here in Lafayette. The president of our company is here with me this morning, Blaine Como. I'm going to ask him after the meeting this morning if maybe he could take me on an on-site visit so I can look at one of those, see what it looks like and smells like. Safety Management Systems, our HSE division, is showing growth through both organic and diversification initiatives. While oil and gas remains a large part of our business, diversification in other industry sectors and geographies are showing great promise. The industrial construction market is expected to be very active in Louisiana in 2020, and SMS is focusing on taking advantage of all the new opportunities in this space. Even though most of our expansion is outside of Acadiana, those operations all get supported from Acadiana, which adds to the local economy. That trickle-down effect is adding to employment here in Acadiana, causing us to lease more space, such as the new University Avenue Ambulance Operations Station we opened last year, and the conversion of office space in our multi-purpose buildings out on North University campus. All this to accommodate more dispatchers and more IT staff who support the operations company-wide. I'm very proud of the company's ESOP. 80% of Acadian is owned by the employees, and my family retains the other 20%. Acadiana area provides very loyal employees, and I have with me the senior executive managers of Acadian, and I'd just like to ask them to raise their hands back there in the back of the auditorium, please. I tell you, I have a great team, and I might be the spark plug, but they're the engine that gets all the work done. I also would like to conclude by saying I've noticed and met when I came in for coffee this morning some elected government officials that are here, and my hat is off to you. I have great respect for people in the environment we're in today that run for office and try to do the best they can in leading our community forward. So thank you very much for your service to our community. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Richard. We're going to have some questions for you later on your new cannabis client. Just make a note of that. But first, I'd like to circle back to Ed Jimenez. We're very happy that you made it off the highway. Ed is Vice President for Business and Economic Development for Entergy.
Good Hello. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for waiting for me, I guess. I apologize for that delay. I'm accustomed to taking this trip. My first job out of LSU was in Lafayette, and I used to tell my friends I worked on Wall Street because the name of the street was Wall Street. Look, congratulations to the Advocate for having their second annual economic outlook. This is great. It's always exciting to be with a group of diverse business leaders in a room. I know Troy, One Acadiana, does this often enough in a more private setting, but it is exciting whenever we can share our thoughts about the economy with other business leaders. What I'd like to do, I guess, is I know I heard it was 2 minutes. I wasn't sure about that. I might take longer. But I'd like to kind of tackle in three places what it looks like for Entergy from an economic outlook perspective, from the utility industry perspective in the state of Louisiana. So it might not be specific to the Acadiana region, but really to Louisiana. And I apologize for my voice. I was fortunate enough to go to the LSU game, and I yelled a lot. So I might take a lot of sips of water while I do this. But let me start with economic development. As a utility, that's one of our main focus. I'm glad that Entergy sees economic development as part of their core mission and was fortunate enough to join them in 2011. And one of the things that we continue to do is invest in our communities through economic development. Things like site certification. I know Troy is doing a great job with that, and I think there's 15 certified sites in the Acadiana region. 6 of those are part of Entergy, and where we help get those sites certified. We've also recently hired a recruiter, an industry recruiter, Rock. I think I saw Rock. He's out there in the audience. He's fabulous. He came from LED. And really, we're going out, visiting with companies, telling them the story about why Louisiana is a great place to do business. We've also invested in technology with our site selection center. If you've ever been to it, you've seen we continue to upgrade that. If you've never been to it, please go to it. You can find it through goentergy.com, sites and buildings database. It's a fantastic tool that we provide to anybody all over the world to find the right sites and buildings in Louisiana that meet their criteria. From a grid modernization perspective, so the second area that I want to talk about is where we're making investments in Louisiana. So we're modernizing our grid. We've been doing this for quite some time. We started with generation, our generation fleet. We're building currently, we completed a 1,000 megawatt, almost 1,000 megawatt CCGT in St. Charles Parish. We're in the process of completing another close to 1,000 megawatt CCGT in Lake Charles. And we have a smaller 336 megawatt power plant in St. Tammany Parish that will be completed in 2021. So we've done our investments in our generation to modernize that fleet. We're also been investing in transmission, and now we're moving into the distribution side to bring technology, digitalization to our consumers, and at the tune of about $4 billion a year, in a 3-year cycle is what we're spending in Louisiana over the last 5 years, and this will continue on for another 5 years, where we're spending, like I said, about $4 billion in the state to improve our grid. This is going to, what this will do is we know that a resilient economy cannot exist without reliable, safe, and affordable power. So, like I said, recently, not far from here, we spent about $100 million on a transmission project what we did there was improve the ability to inject power into this market so that when new companies show up, we're not having to try to keep up with them and not meet their expectation. A lot of time these projects are now that are coming to Louisiana and anywhere in the U.S., the timelines have shortened, so it's our perspective that we need to make the investments before the companies come here. So let me move to the third piece that we're hearing a lot about as a utility, and it's clean power. And clean power, I guess many people think about it truly as renewable. But let me start about what Entergy did many years ago, and we've been fortunate, right? We're here in Louisiana. I heard somebody speak about the oil and gas industry. Our investments have really been on the gas side because as our CEO usually says when he's doing this thing, the reason the world is round is because it's full of gas. But we do have a lot of gas. And Entergy, because of our footprint being in the middle south, most of our generation fleet is gas driven. But we also made investments in the early 1980s in nuclear. And nuclear is carbon free. And we've got 2 very large nuclear plants in Louisiana that provide carbon free energy for our customers. But that we're not going to stop there. We know that solar, wind, and other resources is an area of interest to many of our customers, many of our customers' customers. And so that's where we're headed next. We recently made a commitment to reduce our carbon footprint to 50% of where it was in 2000 by 2030. We don't really know exactly how we'll get there, but we're confident that technology is moving fast enough that we've made that commitment to our shareholders. Like I said, to get to 50% of where we were in 2000 by 2030. We're recently approved a project in Port Allen for a 50 megawatt solar facility. We're about to launch a new request for proposal for additional solar resources. We'll see how that goes, where the prices come in. But we know that that's an area of interest, like I said, to a lot of our customers. And we're listening to our customers and trying to bring the products and services that they're looking for from a utility. I think I'm going to leave it there and take questions later. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ed. Okay, so that wraps up the first part of our morning. Thank you so much to all the panelists for your insights. We have about an hour now for the second part, which is a panel discussion. And I'd really like for it to be a discussion, and I'm going to try to not jump around too much. But keep in mind, we have about an hour, and I have a lot of questions. And a lot of these questions are from people in the community, and I'm going to try my best to get to as many of them as possible. If we have a few minutes at the end, also, we have a mic, and we'll be able to take some questions from the audience. But we're going to try to get you out of here at 10. So I'm going to hand it over to our business editor, Adam Daigle, to get us started with the first few questions.
This is the pop quiz portion of this event, so don't worry, we'll take it easy on you because, we like you. But this is for Troy Wayman, and anyone else afterward would like to contribute, go right ahead. Troy, you mentioned a little bit about opportunity zones, and we've written a lot about that in the past. I think that's got a chance to really kind of, be a game changer for some communities. My question is, how many private dollars have been invested in the community so far, and kind of what are the status of these opportunity zone projects and ideas right now?
Well, I don't have an exact figure on how many dollars have been invested in the community so far. But I do know if you look at some of the local dollars that are being put into play, Lafayette General has an Opportunity Zone Fund, and obviously they're using that for some development in the oil center, on some of the properties that they own in the oil center. There are other opportunity zones. I believe there are some, other Opportunity Zone funds that are looking to go into play in some other projects, particularly around the downtown opportunity zones, I believe, and Anita's in the audience there, and she can correct me if I'm wrong on that, and she would probably love to do that. But we do see, the issue that we have right now is the opportunity zones are still relatively new. In fact, we have a meeting next week with APC in D.C. With the White House Opportunity Zone Revitalization Council, which should, it's a roundtable discussion that hopefully will give us a little more clarification on some of the things that are available. But one of the people locally, I think if you talk with Natalie's husband, Cian Robinson, he's working with the Lafayette General Foundation and the Opportunity Zone Fund that they have. He can provide you a lot more insight on where that is. But we do see that there are billions of dollars at play nationally, and it's going to go to the places that are most prepared. And that's what we've been working with, trying to make sure that we are ahead of the game. And in fact, we are. We've gotten the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, very unfortunate acronym, HORC, has been down here and visited with us. We had a roundtable discussion on the campus at UL. They also, with APC, visited Opelousas and had some discussions there. So they recognize the work that we've done with this prospectus, but getting that national recognition is only part of the equation, but it does show that we are ahead of the game as it relates to being prepared to utilize those funds.
All right, my next question's for Flo Meadows. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one additional thing to add too. So there's a lot of great local initiatives taking place around the Opportunity Zone. So one thing that's taking place right now is that Acadiana is partnering with DDA, APC, LCG. There's a lot of acronyms here. CFA, Festival International to put on the OZ Pitch Fest 2020, which will take place in April in this building. So what we're looking to do is bring in national investors and put them in front of local projects to try to see if we can get some investment here in local projects. And the only other thing I want to say in regards to opportunity zones is I've been following this and went to a couple of different conferences, and what I find interesting is a lot of places that are doing good work in it is really about striking the balance between investing in projects that could turn a profit for the investor, but also provide things that the people living in those communities actually want. So I've been to a lot of different idea sessions. So just really striking that balance, making sure that it's catering to the people who live in those communities. After all, that's what the opportunity zones were designed for, but still something that investors can get behind and basically leverage their capital gains with. So.
And Adam, I'd like to add to that I think 2020 will be the year to watch what happens in our market on opportunity zones. I mentioned earlier $500 billion. That's a lot of liquidity, looking for a place to put their money. Our communities to be commended on all the early work that we have done, Troy. It has been tremendous. We've been ahead of many other cities that are a lot larger than us. So we are very well positioned for significant OZ fund dollars to reach our market. We heard about the local dollars, but I think we have some strong national interest in our market now. So I think 2020 will be the year to watch to see some significant projects getting invested in.
All right, yeah, my next question is for Flo. We talk about building a strong economy. We talk about skilled workforce, tax structure, that sort of thing. Down on the list is always that quality of life that people enjoy. Last local election, we've seem to have a focus on government getting kind of back to the basics, roads, drainage, police, low taxes, if not any new taxes, whatever. How do we get to raise awareness for that, to entice development with that quality of life? Marcus Park is being developed with private dollars. Are there enough private dollars to do more than that?
Would you repeat the last part of your question, please?
The Marcus Park is being developed with private dollars.
Yes.
I mean, is there more private dollars out there to kind of keep this thing going?
For quality of life issues?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. So much of what's happening depends on catalytic projects, and I think the opening of Marcus Park, the airport expansion, are the things that are going to drive others to take a look at. There'll be the vehicles, if you will, that will ignite what else could and should be happening in our communities. We're already seeing it happen. If we look at Parish Proud, I think Skyra Rita is probably in the audience with us. That's a $1 million fund that was established to call our attention to this very fact. And when you see people doing that kind of investment, it is going to drive other investment to these kind of projects. So we absolutely look for more to happen in that area in 2020.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that's we've got a significant focus on in our new strategic plan is the quality of life, quality of place. And the difficult thing is it is something that's difficult to measure. I don't have a metric that's a difficult metric to show you that it's great living here. You have to kind of experience it. But to that point, it is things like the infrastructure. It is things like the availability of the arts and the access to the arts and the access to healthcare and those types of things. As we've seen, and I know this has been talked about ad nauseum, but the way that the workforce has changed, that people move to where they want to live and then they find a job, that kind of makes my stomach hurt to think about. Different generation. I found a job first and then moved to wherever the job was. But being prepared for those sorts of things, and Flo's exactly right. Things like the Parish Proud initiative from the Stuller Foundation, phenomenal effort to make sure that we're not only keeping our community clean, but we have a tremendous pride already in our community, but making sure that pride shows. And then you look at other efforts that are coming from initiatives like the Love Our Schools program that are also showing significant strides in public education and the support of public education and those things. I think it's phenomenal to see those types of things being put into play.
My next question's to you, Ben. We're talking creative economy and kind of raising awareness in that area. We got an administration that's going to go back to the basics of government and getting established. How do we raise awareness and keep that on the forefront?
So much for the fluff question. I saw. Well, let me just say this. The cultural economy. When Mayor President Robodeau launched his initiative a couple of years ago, it was the first time publicly I'd heard an elected official talk about the importance of the cultural economy. So that was very significant, and the work that's been done through that fund over the last couple of years has been very significant to the work that we do. I have not heard anyone ever say that the cultural economy is not important. I have heard arguments and differences on whose role it is to fund that, and so there's no question. The cultural economy is now the number 2 piece of our economy. We have great momentum along those lines, and so now we need to figure out what happens moving forward. And if the local government is not going to be involved in that discussion, then we need to find ways to continue the momentum that has been built through the creative economy in our community.
And I guess one last question, and this will be for you, Dr. Harder. I'm curious for jobs in 2020 that are going to be kind of difficult to fill, hard to fill in some in our region. What are going to be the hot jobs in 2020?
Well, I think it ties back to some of what you heard before. Healthcare just continues to, as it becomes more sophisticated, more technology-driven, but more people-focused. That set of skills is critically important to teach and train correctly, for not just so that an employee is successful, but that a patient is properly cared for. So I think healthcare in conversations and working with all of higher ed, we're trying to get at that. The shortage that Mr. Zuschlag talked about, directly related to healthcare. I don't know what year this is, 10th, 15th year of a nursing shortage in our region, and so that will continue. As we continue to diversify here, information technology, the whole AI aspect of things, I think, and all the things that I'm talking about are high wage, high demand jobs. But you can't do those jobs with a high school diploma or less, or even sort of some general college. You need some specific skills. So I think in those cases we definitely reflect the shortages that are happening nationally as well. It's just, I think, more acutely felt here because we've got such low educational attainment. So we'll continue to focus in those areas.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on healthcare. We were hoping to have David Calicod, the CEO of Lafayette General Health, here today. Unfortunately, don't get sick today because all of the leaders in Lafayette General are at a leadership summit with their colleagues at Ochsner. So I was hoping, Gary Wagner, if you could give us, you talked a little bit about how healthcare has become more of a driver in this economy. Can you talk a little bit more about what you see coming in 2020?
Sure. I think the transformation in Lafayette from what was largely oil and gas to more service-oriented in the healthcare sector has really been pretty remarkable. If you go back to just give you a quick stat that I think you might find interesting, if you go back to 2001, which is the oldest these data are for metropolitan areas, 40% of the region's economy was related to oil and gas. In 2018, that number was down to 11%. So oil and gas is now the fourth largest sector in the economy, and healthcare is very soon to be the largest sector in our economy, almost 25,000 jobs. The average wage there is almost $900 a week, which is above the average for our region. So these are, in general, very high-paying, high-skilled jobs. What we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years actually has been pretty remarkable in terms of that transition as well, because we lost so many jobs from oil and gas, but it's really growth in healthcare that has helped bolster what's been happening in the region. I mean, outpatient care facilities since 2013 have experienced job growth of almost 20%. And if you look at health practitioners, which includes chiropractors, optometrists, physical therapists, so essentially non-typical physicians that we would think about are general practitioner physicians, the employment in those areas is up 40% in just the last 6 years. So what I look for going forward is kind of echoing Dr. Harder's comments. So I think healthcare is going to really be one of, if not the key driver of our region moving forward. And the particular skill sets run the gamut. If you're looking at those health practitioners or outpatient care facilities, you're looking at support staff all the way up to the highly skilled IT individuals. So I think we're going to see job growth in those sectors that really cover a lot of different occupations.
I'd like to add how we're seeing that show up in commercial real estate numbers. So if we take a look at 2019, as I mentioned earlier, you have LHC headquarters, 45 million, Ali and Patlolo, 4 million. There are very few new office buildings being built, but the one that's being built on one of the Rue Streets off of Pinhook is a $4.5 million medical office use. And businesses like to cluster, and so I know the work of One Acadiana and LIDA is focused on building that healthcare cluster. And so we are anticipating to see much more in the way of medical and healthcare growth. But in 19, they were by far the most notable sales that took place in our community.
If I could just add one thing on healthcare. In the last 10 to 15 years, particularly more recently, I've noticed a trend where not near as many patients are going to Houston as in the past for further treatment. In fact, there's a lot more coming to Acadiana from around the state, and then from here, more often now they're going to New Orleans, to Ochsner's, and other facilities down there. There are still some going to Houston, but they're just less. In other words, our quality of care here in Acadiana is excellent. And an awful lot of the patients from the rural areas that used to go to Houston or go to New Orleans first come here, and then if they need higher level of care, more often I see them now going to New Orleans. I just wanted to point that out.
Can I say one thing? And I think that's important because also as healthcare is more about serving people in their homes, it's an opportunity for good paying jobs in rural communities. So we see a lot of articles about the strain to keep individuals in rural communities, which in Louisiana is such a huge part of who we are. And so I think healthcare can help revitalize those communities if people are properly trained and have the opportunities that a number of folks referred to.
All right, now to some of our targeted questions, and Ben, I'll pick on you again. You know, we've got the Cajun Dome and the Hyman Center and facilities that are good for our market. Tell me, is this Should we look at maybe new facilities down the road, 5 or 10 years from now, to get bigger shows and bigger events to come to Lafayette?
Well, there are two main things that are inhibiting us from reaching our fullest potential in terms of tourism. One is infrastructure, as you referenced. Our number one priority is a full-service, minimum 300-room hotel at the Acadiana and the Convention Center and the doubling of the Convention Center. It's a great project by the university, part of their university commons plan, which if you haven't seen that, is a wonderful game-changer type project. And that which leads me to the second thing, which would be density, connectivity, walkability, all those things that you find when you travel to a town that is excelling in the convention business. You get out of your car, you park your car, you have a hotel, you have restaurants, you have the convention center, you have all those things that people are looking for. And so those two things are perhaps, like I said, the two biggest things that are holding us back from reaching our fullest potential. The downtown development is a huge piece of that. There are 27 cranes in downtown Nashville right now. If we could have 2, I think that would be great. But there's no faster way, I don't think, to grow tourism than the convention business. And so we have infrastructure challenges there, not just in terms of the convention center, but we only have 3 full-service hotels, which allow you to host big meetings. And right now, we really are down to 2. The Garden Plaza and the Holodome is going through some struggles right now. So if we're going to bring a meeting to town, we have basically 3 options in this current environment. One would be the DoubleTree. The second would be Wyndham Garden and the Cajun Dome and the Convention Center, of course. So those 2 things, infrastructure, density, downtown redevelopment, all game changers on University Commons project, could be game changers for our industry.
I would like to direct this to John. Can you, Lafayette has lost some sizable downtown bank operation sites this year and in recent years. You spoke a little bit about how these speak to larger changes in the banking industry. But can you speak, are there local problems you see in Acadiana, or do you think that we're going to continue to have a large locally owned community bank presence here?
Well, I don't think banking is necessarily different from any other industry. When you have consolidation, it definitely plays a negative role in some areas. As far as the customer base is concerned, there are plenty of great banks still in Louisiana and Lafayette that can take over the customers. It's more about what that industry or what that bank necessarily did for the community, and it's very hard sometimes to gain that back. But the hope is that in the case of losing a bank, that the acquiring bank necessarily comes back in and revitalizes the area of where that main office is. And that's an important aspect for all of us, because I know especially in the world of banking, we contribute a lot to many different nonprofits throughout our region. So I do think it has the potential to be a negative, but it also has a great potential to actually drive greater commitment to the region if the acquiring banks so desire.
My question is for Ed. Energy has been cited as a leader in kind of economic development and education. Then you look at it, and our numbers still kind of lag both kind of regionally and nationally. What do you think is kind of holding us back and we're missing out on?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have mentioned this. The workforce, this is not just a problem for Acadiana. It's not just a problem for Louisiana. It really is a problem in the U.S. with the right workforce. That's an area that we absolutely agree we need to work with. And as a company, we've made commitments. A few years ago, we committed $5 million towards workforce development programs in the state. We've concentrated our efforts in certified for manufacturing certifications. All the different areas that we know the economy is moving towards, the U.S. economy is moving forward towards, and where there's shortfalls, that's an area that we know we need to make investments, and other business partners need to make investments as well to help our educators get the right folks out there in the workforce. So, like I said, it's not, we shouldn't shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. This is not just a problem that we have in the state. It's everywhere in the U.S., but we can't, be complacent. I think people like Troy and One Acadiana, they're working hard on this effort as well, and so we try to partner with our regional groups like One Acadiana in their efforts on workforce development. And we'll continue. We'll continue. Half of our charitable contributions in Louisiana, I think Louisiana, our charitable contributions annually is around $11 million in charitable contributions. 50% of that goes towards education, K-12, early childhood development, and then higher education as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a theme. It used to be when you asked what the obstacles were, it was capital, capital, capital. Now it seems to be workforce, workforce, workforce. Arthur, I have some questions about oil and gas, and you have a little bit of a different challenge when it comes to workforce. I received a couple of questions, and they're kind of related. One is it possible to still convince young people to seek good careers in oil and gas in Acadiana? And the second is whether some of these family-owned companies are facing challenges in passing the torch generationally.
Yes and yes. The children of those folks who have made their living in the oil and gas industry have lived the booms and the busts. So, my children included. And while I never preached in my household, whatever you do, don't go into oil and gas, that's sort of been the overall message. So yes, that future generation has definitely shied away from an industry that's been so volatile, which is going to present difficulties down the road. However, the flip side is that our industry definitely provides extremely high-paying jobs that don't necessarily require four-year degrees. So when the industry is healthy, the opportunities are tremendous for people who wish to enter oil and gas. So, I think that helps balance the scales. And to return to a previous question about private dollars for quality of life projects in Acadiana or really elsewhere, I would say that is not in any way, shape, or form decoupled from economic expansion and health. The people of Acadiana are incredibly generous. And so if they're allowed to prosper in an environment that encourages economic development and business activity, they give back. That's why Munkus Park is so named. Mr. Jim Munkus was an extremely successful oil and gas service company operator. And another prime example is my mentor, Paul Hilliard, who made the lead gift for the University Art Museum. So, if we provide those opportunities for folks, they've shown us that those dollars do come back.
Can I say one thing? But I think it's also, to Mr. Percy's point, how does higher ed react to that? What is oil and gas today is not what oil and gas is 10 years ago. Can you get young people interested in drones? Yes, you can, right? So, can you get them involved in something that's oil and gas related that has an environmental benefit to it? Yes, you can. So we just have to be thoughtful about what it is that people are looking for today when we think about a sector that has been ingrained in our community for decades. It's a little different.
And I'd like to add to thank Dr. Savoy for the work being done at the university to focus on that. I know there's a good bit of work, and you've moved people into positions of leadership to focus on Energy 2.0. How do you use what it is we have in the way of artificial intelligence and machine learning to take it up to the next level? Because this area was instrumental in Energy 1.0, and no doubt will be at the very forefront of driving Energy 2.0. So I think we just need to stay tuned for the future of that industry, and that our university will be driving it.
My question's for Corey. We're talking entrepreneurship, and I like writing stories about people who hustle to start a business and bust their rear end to get established. Tell me about this year. What are some areas that people might look to kind of start a business? If they want to start business, what are some segments of the economy that give them an opportunity?
Sure. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. Once again, I know last year Flo mentioned about disruptive technology and being able to leverage that to really take, just really capture your place in an ever-changing market. Just the other day I met with a business, a group of guys who came together and purchasing a 3D printer because they've identified some opportunities and are actually going to go after a corporate contract where they're able to produce things using that. So I think that most people that I work with, they have an entrepreneurial spirit about them, and they're just looking to find their place and really produce something that can sort of take them there, which is why it's important. The initiative that I mentioned earlier that we're 1A is partnering with LEADA and a couple other organizations to create the Small Business Resource Navigator, because many of the people that we work with, they are absolute experts in their craft. Whatever it is, whatever service it is that they're selling or product they're producing, they're experts in it. However, they may not necessarily have the business acumen to facilitate the other business activities needed to successfully run a business. Many of these people, they don't have an MBA or they don't have a general manager on staff, or they're not a second or third generation business owner. They're just experts in their craft. So I think it's really just exposing them and connecting them to those resources. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask what might be a difficult question, but we did have several questions that came to us online that addressed, rising economy does not lift all boats equally. And there were some questions about lack of diversity in our business leaders. And the struggles that minority-owned businesses in particular have in this community. And also, how do we develop the north side and stem some of the flow of all those dollars to the south part of Lafayette? And I also thought, as part of this, maybe Dr. Savoy, you would want to weigh in on from a higher education standpoint, or also Dr. Harder, what we're doing to attract minorities to our higher education facilities and train them to become members of this business community.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and one that we think about quite often. The university established, we've had an Office of Minority Affairs for a while, but we've expanded that significantly and try to provide additional services to students. Those efforts have been recognized the last 2 years nationally by Diversity, Inc., and we've got some sort of award for our initiatives to increase participation by underrepresented groups. What I can tell you is it's not something that just happens. You have to be intentional about it. You have to focus on it. You have to set soft goals, but people need to understand that as a public institution, we should represent the public that we serve. In order to do that, we have to provide opportunities, we have to provide support, and we have to provide encouragement. And so we do that very intentionally. We've gotten involved with the community in a variety of ways with various partnerships, but through our hiring processes, we make sure that we have underrepresented groups in the pool to be interviewed. Oftentimes, or historically, many of those people were omitted prior to having the opportunity to do interviews. And it's starting to work, but it has to be intentional.
And I agree with everything that Dr. Savoy said. And for SLCC, we've grown our minority population in terms of students to be 37% of our student population. We actively sought federal designation as a minority-serving institution, which has given us a grant of over $4 million to create the Center for Minority Excellence to focus on the complexities that come with being successful when you are first generation and you come from a community that doesn't understand what it means to be in college. And I might have even said this last year, what is a bursar? What is a registrar? And so how is it that we become more engaged with those folks? And for us, we've also been very active in trying to bring college to a lot of the underserved high schools. I think diversity from a demographic perspective, we are sensitive to the fact that it is not just ethnicity, it's also your geography. And so, you know, we're fortunate to have campuses in 9 parishes and do a lot of outreach, but Dr. Savoy's point is absolutely dead on. You have to be focused on it and you have to be intentional about it. We've increased diversity across the board at every level in terms of hiring. We're very proud of that, but we can't take our eye off the ball. The Commissioner of Higher Ed was here last Friday and talked about the fact that in Louisiana, you know, while we have a low overall graduation rate from 4-year institutions for Caucasian individuals compared to the country's average, it's even lower for African Americans. And so we all just have to do a better job, I think. And that's why I go back to the 55 by 25 and the folks that have talked about supporting, you know, early education. All of the lack of investment in those early years is what higher education tries to make up for when those individuals are older, and which all of us pay for when those individuals are not successful. And so we have work to do. But I think we're paying much more attention to it now than we ever have.
I just wanted to add, as far as the business community is concerned, I believe that intentional relationship building is a must in order to get minority businesses involved, to where it extends beyond just a simple invitation to certain events or key economic or business initiatives. And what I mean by key relationship building is really plugging in with things going on in minority communities and attending their events, attending those events, and really plugging in and meeting who these people are on a personal level. Because once you do that and you get in their environment, it just builds that relationship. So whenever a greater initiative is being put on, you know, we have more representation. They feel comfortable. I feel that it builds trust. But it has to be intentional from organizations with resources to connect with them where they are. A couple of things that I've seen throughout 2019 that I've really enjoyed seeing was, for instance, Lita met with the chamber presidents of the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Asian Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, to really explain what it is that organization does in ways that can be of benefit. So I think that was something tremendous that was done. One Acadiana, through the Urban Revitalization and Development Initiative, reached out to the coteries and had a few of our stakeholder meetings there, so that the stakeholders of that organization can see what the great work that's being done in Northside Lafayette. There's a lot of community and business leaders in the north side of town that are doing great work. I think of Tina Shelvin with the Macomb Vize Neighborhood Coterie, who has a business plan. She has an entire economic and business development committee, and she has a list of 10 items that she's trying to execute in 2020. And she can definitely use the resources. I think of Dustin Cravens, president of the Holy Rosary Development Board, who's doing phenomenal work, and with them obtaining that capital outlay funding from the state. A huge component of what they're trying to do in that community is provide a space for entrepreneurs to come and receive business training. So really tapping into things that are already going on, serving as a presence there and continuing to build that trust. LSBDC did a series of workshops with the Black Chamber of Commerce last year. So I think it's stuff like that intentionality that really goes a long way. I know Opportunity Machine, which is our incubator, they're talking about hosting a boot camp series in the north side of Lafayette. So they're being intentional about coming to where those business owners and those entrepreneurs are. So just in my dealings with the community, I can assure you that there are a number of minority business owners and leaders. We just need to be intentional about connecting with them and restoring that trust.
Yeah, I would say one of the things I noticed when I moved here a couple of years ago was there seemed to be a conspicuous absence of a focus on minority business development. And to that end, there had been some work done, and I plugged into it with LIDA and with LCG, doing some research with Robin Hamilton and some others, and we connected obviously with UL and Tanisha Mallory UL, who, by the way, I think today's her birthday. So happy birthday, Tanisha, if you're watching. So to that end, I mean, I sat around in a room with Greg Gautreaux and with Joel Robideau, and we're trying to figure out what's best to do for minority business. And I thought, well, this is not exactly the right group to be deciding that, is it? You know, you've got three, what I would call maybe seasoned white guys trying to figure out how to best help the minority community. We look at it and realize we've got one chance to get it right, and that's one of the reasons that we're working on this program that Corey mentioned earlier, that will be a small and minority business accelerator type program, because a lot of the folks that get to, like Heidi Malauson with Small Business Administration, they get there, as Corey kind of pointed out, too early. They don't know, they're not prepared to take advantage of the resources that Heidi and her organization offer. So we want to work directly with her to make sure that this program is helping people get prepared for that. One other thing I want to point out, if I can go back to the opportunity zones issue for just a moment. Technology is a great thing. You know, you get texts from people, and thank you, Monique, for pointing something out to me. I mentioned the national recognition that we've been getting on our Opportunity Zone work, and that being only part of the equation. Great example of some of that recognition, and the result of it is Forbes recently published a list of the 20 top Opportunity Zone catalysts, and that's Opportunity Zones and Opportunity Zone funds. And our Invest Acadiana program, our prospectus and our investacadiana.org website made that list of the top 20 Opportunity Zone catalysts. So we're very proud of that. And because of that listing, we have 2 national Opportunity Zone funds that are looking at investment in Lafayette alone.
Just a quick comment from the banking side. All the regulatory agencies have basically created a Department of Minority and Women Inclusion, and I think that's been a great step to put that dialogue front and center in front of the 5,200 banks in the country, and I think it's taking great steps to help bring in new people into the industry that historically haven't worked in banking. So just want to let everybody know about that program.
Okay, we're doing well on time. We have a couple more questions for our panelists, but we want to make sure that we get to the audience in case you guys have any questions. So I thought I'd throw it out there real quick in case anybody has a question they want to ask before we move on. Yes, we've got a mic.
Thank you all again for being here. I'm Sam Oliver. I'm the executive director here at the Acadiana Center for the Arts. A question that I've heard Dr. Wagner touch on, and I wonder if you could touch on this again, is the flight of people aged 25 to 55 from the state of Louisiana, by and large, where I think, again, you have better numbers than I do. And I wonder what we as a community working together, and especially as a business community, need to do and can do about reversing that trend as people come out of institutions of higher learning like UL, keeping them here, but then also attracting a talented, skilled workforce back to this region from within that demographic, which is really the core workforce demographic.
Thanks for the question. I want to point out that Adam was actually the person who initially asked me the question that prompted me to dig into the data. But what I can tell you is looking at Louisiana, and I just looked at college-educated individuals. If you go back from 2000 to 2017, the state lost almost 90,000 college-educated individuals on net. Most of those were to Texas. A good chunk of those occurred in 2006 following Katrina, which is not terribly surprising, but I think one of the things that surprised me is that those people never returned. But when you looked at the 25 to 54 age cohort, and the reason I looked at that group is that's prime working age, individuals that were categorized over 55, some of them could be moving because of retirement. You know, over the last 10 years, the state has lost almost 28,000 individuals. And the reason why that's significant is individuals are the greatest resource that we have, right? People are creative, they're innovative, they come up with new ways of doing things, and that's what helps drive the region. So in other words, I think the region probably grew slower over the last decade because we lost college-educated individuals than had those individuals stayed. Now, in terms of just what we can do, I think at just a very high level, the research that looks at migration finds that people basically migrate for two reasons. You move because of family reasons, and I think this is largely kind of the retirement end of the spectrum, and then people largely move for job reasons. And if you look at the data where people from Louisiana were moving to, the top 4 states were Texas, Florida, Colorado, and Virginia, and all of those over the last 5 years were in the top 10 in the nation in job growth, and we're typically in the bottom 5. So I think if you would ask me a question about how do we get those people to stay, how do we attract other people, we have to figure out ways of creating jobs at a faster pace and higher paying jobs.
Good morning. My name's Carol Reed, and I have a question about the legacy lawsuits. As a child, I grew up traipsing the woods in the Ville Platte oil field, familiar with ponds of oil and being extremely careful not to fall into those things. I understand the economic impact of or somewhat understand the economic impact of those lawsuits on the business climate. But at the same time, I do wonder who should be responsible, or how do we take care of these Superfunds? Because in fact, in Tate Cove, it is a Superfund site right over the Chico Aquifer. So whose responsibility, not so much as in paying for it, but how do we come up with a solution to the environmental impact that has happened, and how do we correct it?
Well, first, thank you for your question. And I think it's important to note that the oil and gas industry in Louisiana is 120 years old. And the operating practices and regulations have changed drastically over that time period. So much of what you witnessed as a child were things or practices that were actually allowed back then, and perhaps some of the environmental impacts were not as known then as they are now. So that being said, oil and gas activity that is happening in the state today under modern permitting requirements are not creating that type of impact. But nevertheless, those sites do exist, and I do agree with you. I've been involved in some of those. In many cases, the current owners, if those properties are still producing, have inherited those responsibilities and are working to clean them up. But what we also see is that many of these sites have long since been produced and abandoned, and so now they're liabilities of the state. We do have an orphan well fund in the state. Every producer, oil and gas producer in Louisiana, pays a tax into that fund, and those dollars are used to clean up such sites in the state. That program is run by the Department of Conservation in Baton Rouge. So, the industry has taken some responsibility for that. We voluntarily increased our contribution to that fund about 10 years ago as the number of sites, as you described, increased. So that's the solution. It's partnering with industry and coming together to clean those things up. And unfortunately, what we've seen in much, not all, but much of the litigation is that the dollars that are generated by the lawsuits aren't being used to clean up the land at all. It's just strictly about the money, and that's just as wrong, and it's just as impactful. We worked hard as an industry to pass Act 312, which required judgments to have money set aside to actually remediate the environment that was litigated. So that's a step in the right direction. But I think a collaborative effort going forward between government, private landowners, and the state is really what's needed.
Just to make sure I understand, Mr. Price, what you're saying is the industry standards have changed, so we're not going to have those same types of issues. Theoretically, we're not going to have. but also that, that we're changing it to, rather than being compensation, to being more of a cleanup effort. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My name is Catherine Fenstermaker. I work for my family's, this will be third generation, so we're 70 years in business. Oil and gas is our, I guess, bread and butter clientele still. I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the barriers to the tort reform that you mentioned.
Well, tort reform really boils down to a political solution. And yes, and our efforts have been stymied by past administrations. We're very, very hopeful that with the turnover in the legislature, we turned over almost 40% of the Louisiana legislature in the most recent election, that we've hopefully elected more business-minded candidates who are looking to strike a more reasonable balance. And one of the things to consider is that the litigious climate that we find ourselves in benefits the few at the expense of many, and that's inappropriate. So we're quite hopeful that with the newly constituted legislature that we're going to pass some reasonably balanced legislation to still protect private rights, private property owners' rights, but at the same time remove the lottery component from litigation and take the gaming out of the system. And I think that'll benefit all citizens of Louisiana.
We mentioned Northside development and in minority areas earlier. Troy, we talked about a little bit about the I-49 connector. I don't know. I think if you pin people down, they probably think that the project's kind of dead and buried or something. But I'm curious what you all have been doing and plan on doing this year in that department, and should we expect to see any kind of developments?
You have $1 billion laying around that we could. No, the project's not dead. It's still alive and kicking. If you look at this last legislative session, there was $150 million allocated in capital outlay for I-49 South. There are segments of independent utility that are capable of being developed, and then kind of the last piece probably to come into place will be that connector, because it's the big dollar piece. So there are still. We had a report from DOTD recently at our Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and it is still being evaluated. The problem is, without doing those segments of independent utility, you end up having to start over once certain things expire, whether that's environmental studies or changing the route, that sort of thing. So they have ended up having to start over multiple times, and they're in essence kind of starting over again. So it is still being studied. It is still going to happen. It's just a matter of when it will happen, but I think you'll continue to see capital outlay for other segments of the corridor moving forward. So in essence, from about Pinhook south, you'll have beautiful interstate all the way to New Orleans, and then from Pinhook north, we'll probably have to wait and see.
Okay, unless we have any more questions from the audience, I think we're going to wrap it up. We promised to get you all out of here by 10 o'clock. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and to our sponsors. And I'm going to hand it over to Peter for a couple of closing words.
I'm actually going to hand it to Judy Terzotis, but I did want to tell you that this was live streamed, and we probably had maybe a couple of thousand people watching it, so it had almost the same audience as the ball game the other day. And it lives online, and you can watch it over like reruns of MASH or something like that if you want to see how you looked. And anyhow, here is Judy.
Thank you all for coming this morning, and to the panelists, and most importantly to our sponsors, Entergy, Home Bank, Lafayette General Health, and Acadian. Part of our mission is connecting our community, and these kind of events are a perfect example. I mean, journalism isn't just the word on the page or a word on a screen. It's actually people coming together. So that's a really important part of our mission at The Advocate. We are an anomaly in our industry, and I'm really proud of that. We work for a local owner who believes in investing in quality journalism. So we have 400 employees across 3 markets, 125 journalists. I'll let that sit in. That's larger than Phoenix has, Nashville, or Des Moines in their newsroom. So, we're proud of what we do, but we can't do it without you, because local journalism matters, but it's pricey. So if you haven't subscribed, we really encourage you to do so. You can do that in print. That gets you all access to our digital platforms, but also digital only. We have a great business newsletter that we're really proud that we invested 1.5 years ago with your help. So thank you very much. But local matters, and throughout the state, there is actually what we call news deserts, where there is not local reporting, and that's just a crime. So we hope that you'll continue to attend these kind of events and support what we do, but thank you so much, and have a great day.